Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 74 with Chelann Gienger. Good and happy Thursday, my friends. Welcome back to the Wander Wealthy Podcast. My name is Tess Wicks. I'm your host, and today we have a fun show for you. This week's guest is Chelann Gienger. She's actually someone I met a couple of years ago now, and we've just been kind of following each other every once in a while. We met at a convention, and I remember her asking me all about podcasting because I had been doing this podcast, but when it was Words and Money, and Chelann really impressed me because she was, how old was she then? I think she was 18 years old, maybe 19 years old. And she had already been a founder of a company. A little bit of a professional bio. Chelann is a millennial thought leader and young entrepreneur movement creator. At the age of 18, she opened New You Juice Bar along with her partners. And to date, New You Juice Bar has served hundreds of customers on a weekly basis in Yakima, Washington. I think I'm saying that right. I hope so. Within a year of launching New You Juice Bar, she started the Entrepreneur Before 25 podcast out of a desire to inspire and unite young and like-minded entrepreneurs. Now, in September of 2017, at 20 years old, she published her first book, Dear Millennial. You'll hear more about that when we get to talking. And she has just been all around an inspiration for me. This week, we are diving into the topic of imposter syndrome. I thought Chelann would be the perfect person to talk to this about because I myself was a very young entrepreneur when I was starting out. I'm still young. I still consider myself to be young, but I was under 25, and not to mention I look very young, and don't worry, I hear it all the time. I've come to accept that and see that as a strength for me, but it was really hard at first, and it still can be really hard. We talk about getting over the fact that we're young or inexperienced. And this applies not only to entrepreneurship, but also whatever you're trying to pursue in your career, outside of your career, in your finances, in your relationships. There's so many ways that you can feel like an imposter in your own life. And Chelann explains kind of the perfect scenario of how imposter syndrome feels. And then she also dives into her best tips on how she overcomes imposter syndrome. And they're really tangible tips. So I do think they're going to be super helpful for you. Then we dive into a little bit of the money stuff. Chelann shares her pretty unconventional way of growing up, period, but also growing up around money, how she had a really good experience with her parents. They were very savvy in teaching their kids how to manage money, how to budget. And we dive into that a little bit, and she shares her best tips there. And that is the show. I mean, there's so much more to it, and you're going to have to listen, but let's dive into it now. Here is episode number 74 with Chelann Gienger. Chelann, thank you so much for joining me on the Wander Wealthy podcast. It's wonderful to have you. Tell me what's going on in your life today.
Oh, my word. I'm so excited to be here. I feel like we've had this ongoing connection for a few years now, and I got to have you on my show, and it's just so exciting to be here today. My life specifically today is full of interviews and calls, literally all day. I had the morning to get some work done. It's funny, I never call interviews or calls work, but the get into it, write the content, make the systems work this morning, and then the rest of the day, literally till tonight, I am on interviews and calls. So that's what's up in my life today.
Amazing. Well, you have your calendar full.
Yep.
I went ahead and did your kind of professional bio, but I would love for you, because you have such a unique story, and we're going to talk about this, but you are younger than most people who have a full schedule of entrepreneurial shenanigans. So I want to hear what your story is from, I don't know, birth and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I was born in Renton, Washington actually, I don't even know the time. I'm kidding. So yeah, I currently am 21 years old. I am involved in several different ventures and businesses, and in a season right now of just really unique transition, where some things are coming to an end and folding up, and then some really exciting things at the same time are opening up. And so it's been a really interesting season to just learn how to go with the flow on that. But kind of how my entrepreneurial journey started is I come from a very entrepreneurial family. Currently, all of my siblings are involved in multiple different businesses that most of the time they own. And, I'm even business partners with some of them, which is a ton of fun. And that stems from, of course, my parents being entrepreneurial. So the majority of my childhood, I actually grew up in the mountains. And, there was a season where we'd go to town. We'd have like a big town day once or twice a month. I was homeschooled. I was raised to be best friends with my siblings. For a season, we also would like watch one movie a month. And then the rest of the time, like it was up to us to keep ourselves entertained and to learn and just honestly live a dream childhood. It was like a culture shock when we moved to town. So when I was 15, this is when I trace back to me really realizing for the first time, not necessarily what entrepreneurship was like, but realizing the concept. And essentially, I realized the type of life I wanted to live. And this came about through a conversation I was having with a guy who's pretty much my uncle. And he was asking me, what do you want to do? What do you want your future to look like? And so I just started to describe this to him. And at the time, I was going to go to school to be a nurse practitioner. And then we role played that out. And I realized that would not give me the lifestyle I want to live. And in that very moment in time, I started to develop my ideal future that I wanted. I knew I wanted to be location independent. I wanted to be able to travel. I wanted to have my own cute little place. I wanted to be surrounded by just high quality people in my family. And I realized that, taking the traditional route in life wasn't going to get me there. So I came up with the life-changing idea to start a blog. And I was like, this blog is going to make me millions. I'm going to coach people. This is just going to be the best thing in the entire world. And so I went to work creating that. And then that evolved into a health blog, which evolved into health coaching, which I started health coaching and literally created a business at 15 through 16, which is super sketch when I say it these days because I was coaching people who were twice my age on their health. And so eventually, I got to the point where that, I didn't get super into the business side. I didn't make a lot of money from it, but it was where I realized, whoa, I could actually make this work. And so I got to a point with that, I call it the brick wall I hit, where I was like, okay, you're 16 years old. You should probably get a degree to back this up. And so at 16, I enrolled in a program at my community college called Running Start, which was where basically for 2 years and for free, except for your books, you can go to college if you're in your junior and senior year of high school. 16, I was in a classroom with 20 plus year olds, and that was my first real school experience. And talk about another culture shock. And then in my second year of college, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I really need a way to make money, preferably doing something I love that's health related while I'm getting through dietetics school. And no joke, a week later, my brother and his business partner came up to me and were like, yo, Chelann, we're building out a space for a hot yoga studio right now, and there might be a space for a juice bar right by it, a separate business, but it was in the same space. They're like, do you want to help us run it? And the famous line is, well, you know me, I'm a Gienger. I would definitely need some ownership. I knew what I was talking about at 17. So super long story short on that, I knew that aligned with what I was looking for. It aligned with my mission in life. And I prayed about it and I was like, I'm going to do this because this is what I'm supposed to do next. This will take me to the next level. 7 months later, through about 3 times where it just wasn't going to happen, we opened our doors, and that was 3 days after I graduated from high school, 2 weeks before I graduated from college with my associate's degree, and we were off to the races. 5 months later, I went into it owning 25%, and then 5 months later, through 5 hours of me telling you a story, I became majority owner of the juice bar, and we just celebrated 3 years with that in June. And the juice bar, although health coaching was my first business experience, the juice bar has been what everything else in my entrepreneurial life has built up on. From that, I was, spurred on to start the Entrepreneur Before 25 podcast, where I interview young, inspiring entrepreneurs from all around the world who are starting their journey at the age of 25 and under. And that came out of me really, really longing for community, because I was 18 years old, running a brick and mortar business. I had an incredible friend group that just naturally fell away because we had no relating factor. That's what started the podcast. And the podcast just opened just these insane doors that essentially helped me to tap into the world of young entrepreneurship and, eventually become somewhat of an influencer in that space, which then led me to write my book, Dear Millennial, that really is a book that calls the millennial generation to a higher standard of greatness. So life has been crazy, incredible, like everything that I have been involved with, I've just really committed to good, bad, ugly, if it's fun, if it's easy, just like this is going to make me a better person. And I think that when you get up every single morning and you're just really committed to becoming a better version of yourself than you were yesterday, we start to see just incredible growth when we look back. So that is about as brief as I can make it all. It's getting longer to tell the longer time goes on.
I love it. That's wonderful. And it's really true. You've packed a lot of life into, what has it been, like 3 years since you started the juice bar. So much has happened since then. But even when you decided to basically go to college at 16, which is impressive in and of itself, and start your first entrepreneurial venture at 15. I think, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a little while, because we have similar experiences only in the fact that we both started businesses at a younger age. And not to mention, I look very young. And I think for a lot of people, whether it's starting a business or it's just starting to do adult stuff, it can be really difficult to feel confident and feel like you're not just like becoming a total imposter. So we're going to talk about that in a second. However, I do want to the extent that you're comfortable with it, ask you about how money has played a role in your life, whether it's in your business or just in your personal finances. And if you've experienced any growth around money and learning about money in these past couple of years that have been so jam-packed with other life experience.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. For me, it's been a journey of reframing perspective and, really coming at it from an abundance mentality, an enoughness mentality around money, and understanding that like money is a resource. And so just like any other resource that we have in life, it can be converted to other resources. And if that's the case, then anything that I have, my, talents, my ventures, those are also resources that can also be converted into money. It's like a very fluid thing. And so for me, it's never been about the money for me. I've made business decisions like how to pivot your business based off of money because numbers really do not lie. However, I haven't ever made any personal decisions based off of money. I understand that money is an incredible tool. It's an incredible resource. It makes life a whole lot easier, and it's awesome, but it's not my why. It's not my driving factor. And I think that for me personally, that's been a really healthy place to come to because I don't want anything to control me like that. And so in a very roundabout way, I'm definitely a person that learns by observing, and I prefer that over actually experiencing it. So I haven't had a ton of experiences where money's like ruined areas of my life, but I have realized that I want to attract money. I want to make lots of money, but it's not something that is ever going to be my top priority in life.
I like that. And I think that also boils down to, what I get from you is you have pretty specifically outlined what makes you happy. And it's really cool that running your businesses makes you happy as well, where your business doesn't even necessarily feel like work in some ways. Mm-hmm. And I think what a lot of, this is society, but this is also just like people and what we think because of our outside pressure is we think, more things will equal more happiness. And in order to accumulate more things, we need to buy them with money, and we need to have more money to be able to buy them. And when you really distill down the specifics of what makes you happy or what makes you feel full or fulfilled, from the work that you do to the place that you live to the experiences that you get to have, life can actually be really affordable. And then money isn't necessarily as highly regarded because okay, this is what I need to do to get by. Anything beyond that is good. Like, right. That's great. I'll make more money. That's fine. Bring it in. But we all have a threshold, and you've likely identified what your threshold is at this moment in your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's so good. Like, my goal, I've never actually written it down, or it hasn't really been a goal, which this is very contrary, like I said, to young entrepreneurs who are like, hustle, hustle, grind, be a millionaire and retire before 30. Like, that's never been my personal aspiration anywhere. Like, my goal has been, I want to have the financial ability to live my dream lifestyle in whatever season that may be. And that can fluctuate, right? Based off of the season you're in. So like, it might mean one day that I do want to be a millionaire. And in that case, like, sure. Like, and I know that's probably in the future, but that's not my reason for it, to say I'm a millionaire. It's so that I can give what I want to give to people, and so that I can live the lifestyle in the freedom that I want to live. And I do think that it's so important to identify, like you said, like your threshold. What's your bare necessity budget? And then what's your budget you kind of want to aspire to, where you add in the extra massages and eating out and all that. And then what's your okay, this is where I want to be in a year budget. I think there's so much power in that when we realize we can control that. And most likely the dream lifestyle that we want to live it doesn't require us, making 10 million a year.
So I want to get into, thank you for that, by the way. I know it's not always easy to talk about money, especially when you don't typically talk about it on your podcast.
I'm an open book. You could ask me anything.
Yeah. And being able to get your perspective is really helpful for all of my listeners, because we have people from all different walks of life who want to learn from the people who have done things that they want to do. And now I want to talk about, speaking of doing things that people want to do, running business, but also just being such a grown-up when you're at such a young age. And because we've both been through this, and
this is going to be good.
Yeah. I don't know if you've personally experienced someone calling you out for it, but even just the thoughts that kind of go through our heads on, oh my gosh, am I really cut out to be able to do this? I'm 18 or I'm 21, and what am I doing? How do I know? And, we boil that all down to imposter syndrome. So when we were emailing, you said, oh yeah, we can talk about that. So I would love for you to kind of share your experience, share any resistance that's come up over the things that you've wanted to do, and, what, hard points you had to get over and get through. And then after that, we'll kind of talk about tips to overcome it.
Yeah. Oh my word. I can definitely speak to this. And that's why in the email, I was just laughing my face off, because there's been so many times I mentioned earlier that I'm definitely in a season of transition right now, and in a season of decision making and growth, and really stepping out of my comfort zone, which means a lot when I say that, because I'm a very outgoing, not much scares me as a general rule in the business world. And so I've experienced imposter syndrome. And if you're listening and okay, I feel like I know what imposter syndrome is, but I don't. For me, imposter syndrome is when you're in a room and you're I am not supposed to be here. I am out of my league. I am so uncomfortable. How did I even get here? How do I carry on a conversation with this person? That's imposter syndrome. Or imposter syndrome could be you're writing a book about a topic and that you think and then you start writing it and you're who am I to speak to this? Or you're starting a podcast, or you're starting a business. I think we all experience imposter syndrome in probably every area of our life, but it really shows up in business if you are continually pushing yourself, if you're continually growing. And what I have realized is it all comes down to my perspectives and my mentalities. And I had an interview yesterday, and the lady said to me something to me that's like the simplest quote that I've heard before, but it just really hit home for me. And it said, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And I was like, okay, for the first time ever, that really actually set into me, because it's so true. And so the more experience that I have in life and in business, the more I realize it all boils down to what I believe about myself and how I act on my meditations and visions of the future. I'm really big into morning routines, and during the morning routine, I always imagine and visualize my ideal day today, based off of what's on my to-do list for that day, based off of who I'm talking to, down to even how I want to feel in every single one of those interactions. And then I always take a segment of that and I fast forward. I have fun with it. Some days it could be like 6 months from now, my ideal day, or a year, or 10 years. But I really try to constantly put myself in my future self's shoes, because that's what really helps me in those moments where I feel like an imposter. And there was a situation just last week. I was at this event where I was literally standing in this room talking to people who are basically like the cream of the crop leaders of this world. Like it was insane. And I found myself in this room and having these very tangible thoughts of just so uncomfortable. Like, why am I here? And then I realized how incredible it is to be even be able to have these feelings, to have these experiences. Like, how privileged am I to feel out of place? Because that means I'm going in the right direction. And then in that moment, if you can master the ability of like changing your emotions in the moment, I think it's so powerful. And in that moment, I realized that the way I really did want to view this, instead of feeling like an imposter, was to instead learn as much as I possibly could from these people. Like, get in their space, ask them the questions. And because of that, I ended up building the best relationships with, the best people in the room. And they told somebody who's with me, they're like, I was watching her the whole time, and I could see that she was soaking in every word, that she was really internalizing it and asking the right questions. And essentially, that's why they kept the conversation going. And so I think it comes down to that. And if you're okay, I'll just share some of the tangible tips that I use to overcome imposter syndrome. But I think the biggest thing is first, recognize that what you're experiencing is normal, and excitement and fear are actually our body has the same physical response to it. Excitement and anxiety / fear. Our body actually has the same physical response to that. So if in the moment when you're fearful and want to run away, when you don't want to publish that episode, you don't want to publish that book, talk to that person, if you can actually switch that anxiety into excitement, that's a really important step, because that's when you choose to move past it. And when you choose to move past it, that's the difference between the people out there who dream their dreams versus the people who actually make their dreams happen. And so I'm trying to get better about identifying the fear head on, really just recognizing it and being like, this is normal, and then making a plan of action to shift that fear. The reality is I might not be able to get rid of that fear or destroy that fear, but I can learn how to respect that fear and cope with it and make it work for me, not against me. So I hope that some of those tips help you guys, but it all comes down to how you're viewing it. And this year, one of my mantras and commitments to myself, which I've kicked myself for several times already, is to stay on the edge of yikes in life, which means to constantly literally be saying yikes because of some of the things I'm doing and the steps I'm taking.
That's amazing. I have so many reactions to that. First of all, I loved that you started out sharing your story with talking about how it's normal, because if you are experiencing imposter syndrome, that means you're continually growing, which is so true. It's when we get complacent, then we're just going to keep staying in what we're doing, and we'll feel better and better and better and more confident about that. But that obviously is a signal that we need to get uncomfortable again. And so, yeah, it needs to be normal unless you don't want to push yourself anymore, which when we stop growing, what does Tony Robbins say? When we stop growing, we die or something. And the 3 tips you shared, I think even if you're not, those listening aren't interested in entrepreneurship whatsoever, this imposter syndrome comes up in every aspect of your life. Like whether it's in your career and you're just going for that next promotion or trying to take on a project that you're like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to do it anyway. Or it's, dating or trying to get finally informed on your finances. Like there's so many ways that it can creep in. And I love that you go, first, recognize it's normal. Second, recognize that if you're feeling fearful or anxious, you can also identify that, re-identify it with excitement, and then figure out your plan of how you're going to tackle it head on. That's perfect. Mm-hmm. So tangible. Okay, I have one more tangible tip for you, and it's not necessarily in your wheelhouse, but if you have something with, I feel like you had this unconventional way of growing up, so I feel like you might have an unconventional piece of money wisdom that you follow.
My life is unconventional. We just laugh about it.
So, yeah, if you have one, you can share.
Yeah, okay. I don't know if it's actually, I think this is unconventional. My parents are just literally the most incredible parents in the world. And when I was probably 13, they put us on a budget envelope system. And so we would get a salary from them every month based off of what we did. We each had like our chores around the house. And so we wouldn't get that salary if we didn't do that. And then we also had to go through we had a budget and we had a salary based off of the envelope system. And then every month before we got our salary, we had to account all of the money. The parents acted as the accountants and looked it over. And I paid for everything with the salary money they gave me, of course, but I paid for everything except for the food at the house. And I had like a horse, I had dancing lessons, I had piano lessons, school books, everything. And so from a young age, like I've been so blessed to know how to manage money and how to kind of make those choices. And I think that a lot of people just have this massive fear around money, and it's because they're not facing their financial situation. This is my theory. I think it's because they're not facing their financial situation head on and really acknowledging, like sometimes it could be the dark truth or the light truth of where you're at, but it really does take recognizing where you're at in order to move on to another place. So like if you're listening right now and us talking about money is like kind of making your heart like flutter, and you're like, this is making me uncomfortable,
the fear and the anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, we've all experienced it. Okay, I think that's a normal thing too. And for me, that feeling comes when I don't know where I'm at. Right. And so I grew up with, I don't know if that's unconventional or conventional, but it worked. But along with that, we also kind of grew up with the ability or with the no debt mentality. And this came from like, if we spent all of our salary money, like we couldn't get a quote unquote loan from our parents. And so I believe that, having no debt is definitely ideal, but my unconventional, piece of wisdom is to leverage debt. I think leveraging debt, especially in business, is a really powerful tool, like in business and real estate. And I think that debt is only really a bad thing if you're leveraging it recklessly without a plan. I think that if you have a plan for paying that debt, let's say you need to invest in a property that you're going to rent out and that rent is going to pay back that debt or the down payment, and you have a way that this is, by leveraging this debt, it's actually going to make you money in the long run, like that's a healthy thing, I think. And then I also think credit cards are not a bad thing. Like, to be completely real, I got a credit card just a few years ago, and I was actually talking to you about this, Tess, in your Facebook group. I really wish I had gotten one like as soon as it was legal, because of that. Even though I have good credit, like financials and like all of that, it's really hard to, get anything if you don't have a long financial like credit history. So Those are my two unconventional pieces of money wisdom. Leverage debt in a healthy way. Get a credit card and start building credit, and just make sure you're treating that credit card like it's a debit card, like on your bank account, like on your app. Have your credit card pulled up so you can see how much is on it and subtract that from the total amount in your account so you know where you're at. But like, start building that credit, because you'll be in a lot better place if you can, especially if you want to leverage debt, if you do have that credit history.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing.
Just some practical stuff, life lessons.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay, we're going to go into the quick and dirty Q&A round to wrap this up. One of my favorite questions is, now that you shared your brilliant money tips, we're going to pull back, what do they call it? Pull back the cloth or something?
Yeah.
And share an embarrassing money move. And don't worry, I'm going to share as well, because an eye for an eye. I don't want to put you on blast. So if you do have one, either something like a stupid mistake you've made, an embarrassing thing you've bought or didn't buy because you're too frugal, what do you got for me?
Oh my gosh. This could go so many different directions. And to be like honest, like I said, I learn by observing others. So I have not made any huge dollar amount like money mistakes yet. Hopefully I won't, but life. And so just one where you like slap yourself in the face. Okay, here I am. I get a ton of DMs every day. And this is when like I first started getting DMs and people like asking me for advice and all this stuff. This was like a year and a half ago. And I get this guy who's going to start a juice bar. He wants to start a juice bar in Africa. And he was asking me specific juice bar questions. And just a tip, like if you're asking a busy person questions, ask them one easy question at a time if you want them to reply. Because when I get those essays of questions, it's just, I'm like, I can't do this. And so what happened with this guy is I hadn't realized that yet. And so he sent all of these questions. And I was like, okay, I believe in you. Let's just hop on a call. So he was going to call me, but then I missed his call. So I called him and we had like a 30-minute conversation, and it was a good conversation. And I was like, okay, like I'm glad I could help him out. And then a week later on my phone bill, I find out that, and I didn't realize this, like I did not realize that he was calling, like I don't know what didn't register for me. Like it's just one of those moments.
Cell phones just like make things so intangible.
I always keep a little blonde in my hair so that when stuff like that happens, I can just be like, it's fine. I'm just blonde. The bill was like $100 for a phone call. So keep in mind, I'm coaching this guy. So he should technically be paying me, yet I paid $100 for this phone call. And I was like so mad, mainly at myself for like not realizing it was an international call, not doing it, because he gave me his cell phone number. Like it was just,
right.
Yeah. And I've done a lot of other things as well. But when I like was hearing this question, I was like, that's probably the one where I kicked myself the most. That and shipping costs. Oh my word. Watch out. Those will get.
Well, speaking of shipping costs, and I figured this one was perfect because you're like healthy, fitness, living. So I follow this YouTuber on YouTube. I follow this girl on YouTube, and she's like a health and fitness YouTuber, and she's in Australia. And she like obviously uses all these Australian products and is sponsored by them and stuff. But I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just want to get all of the stuff that she eats and she drinks, and all like protein powders and green powders and her special chocolate bars.
And I'll be like her and I'll look like her.
Right? So I'm in Italy, and I luckily didn't ship them to Italy, although it probably wouldn't have been that much of a difference, but I was like, okay, I'm going to ship it to the States because it was a little bit cheaper. But it was still like, I'm paying a good $70 or something in shipping costs to ship all this like protein and chocolate bars from Australia. So, no shame. I still have some left. So I do that a lot.
Were they worth it?
Just like the chocolate. The chocolate's interesting. It's like cocoa-based, like coconut and cacao mixed together, chocolate. So it kind of has this like coconutty flavor that I wasn't expecting. But, I'm still savoring it because that $70 in shipping tastes real good.
Yeah, I feel you. And I am one of those people too, like, and I don't know if I'll ever not be like this, but I just hate spending money. Like, I really do. Because for me, it's like, I would much rather invest it into bigger stuff than like little stuff. So I am that person where even though like it's in the budget and all this stuff, I will stand in a grocery store looking at like, I don't know, what's like the ice cream, the healthy ice cream I want to buy for like 5 minutes. And
with like the 10-cent differences
oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. And I come by it honestly because my dad does the same thing. Like they're really well off, but like still, I went to Costco with him once. This was years ago, and he was in the aisles with a calculator on his phone, like calculating the difference between like 2 different types of food bars and protein. And so like I come by it honestly, totally, and I love living that way and just having that respect for money, but sometimes it's just like buy the ice cream.
Sometimes it's too much, yeah. So speaking of ways you don't like to spend money, let's talk about the non-negotiable money indulgences that you refuse to cut from your budget.
Okay, definitely massage, and super lucky, just a tip for anyone out there who has, I mean, most of the time you can do a trade with your business no matter what it is. I do a lot of massage stuff like on trade, which is awesome, but a lot of it does come out of like my personal budget as well. But massage is a big one. Like, I savor those. They're amazing. I think it's just like the highlight of my life. And then also coffee is a big one. I like to invest in experiences. I hate shopping though, so that really works for me in this case. But probably massage and coffee and wine. I do really like wine.
Just making the list a little bit longer each.
It's like, well, do we need to work on this?
No, I mean, I'm a massage girl and a coffee girl, so I don't blame you.
I knew that's why we got it.
Right. Luckily, the wine here in Italy is very
cheaper
affordable.
Than water.
So. Yes. So you said you like to invest in experiences. What would you say is one investment that you firmly believe has helped you get ahead?
Definitely investing in travel. I think that perspective is one of the most powerful tools that we can ever develop in ourselves. And one of the best ways that I expand perspective is by changing my environment. So that could be traveling on business trips or traveling, like I was telling you, Tess, I'm going to Europe in November. And yeah, there's business stuff involved down there, but like most of it is just a trip to just become part of the culture. It's going to be like a workation. And so I think that's just an investment that is really doable for anyone, no matter how much you're making. Just like set aside however much you can, like every month, and take a trip, maybe start out like once every 2 years and go somewhere for a week, but make it happen and view it as like, this is my education, because it totally is. And you can have a ton of fun in the process. And travel hack that I feel like is super obvious, like bring 1 or 2 of your closest friends with you, because that'll cut your costs like 3 times or 2 times. So traveling is definitely it for me.
Love it. All right, moving on. What is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning and the last thing you do before you go to bed?
The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is I listen to my affirmations for that quarter and my mission, vision, and personal values. I actually like pre-recorded them on my phone, so most of the time I get up at like 4:30 or 5 every morning, and so the first thing it says is, "Good morning, Chelann. Today is an incredible day to be alive. This is what you stand for, value, and promise to do, blah, blah, blah." So that's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning. The last thing I do before I go to bed is I turn my phone on airplane mode. It's already on Do Not Disturb. It lives on Do Not Disturb, but I turn my phone on airplane mode and I turn on, I'm like a granny. I'm an old soul at heart. I turn on my sleep tracker app because I find it entertaining to see, I don't know if that thing's accurate, but it's entertaining to see how long I'm sleeping and the depth of my sleep, etc. So that's what I do.
Wonderful. What is your favorite book, app, or tool, a recommendation? And it can be in the realm of like entrepreneurship or personal development, or if you have a money one, you can share that too.
Favorite app or tool? I'm a really big time blocker, scheduler, like organization calendar person. So Trello or Asana, honestly, like Asana is slowly climbing the ranks as far as what I like the best, are really essential tools in my life, in my personal life and business life, and then for the businesses. And definitely just check those out. They're just incredible for organization stuff, making your life so much more streamlined. This is always the hardest question for me, but I'm going to share one more on the personal side of things, and it's called Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. And this book, I read it a long, long time ago, and then again recently, and it just came in the perfect time and season for me because I, by default, tend to be more of a people pleaser and have a difficult time like setting boundaries. I've gotten so much better since reading this book. And so this really helps you define like what boundaries you need to have, how to set those in a really appropriate and healthy way, and then also like how setting boundaries in your life can really bring you so much more freedom.
All right, Chelann, I am so excited that you came on the show, shared your personal experience, and also shared some really amazing tangible tips around imposter syndrome and money. I'd love for you to tell us where we can find you so we can keep in touch, and then we'll get out of here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been such a cool conversation. Yeah, I am Chelann Gienger everywhere, literally. So if you just look at any social media, you can find me by typing Chelann Gienger, ChelanNGienger. And if you want to just like have an overall view of my life and everything in one place, you can go to ChelannGienger.com.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
And that's it for my interview with Miss Chelann Gienger, the millennial entrepreneur before 25. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was eye-opening to hear from someone that maybe you can relate to or just hear a different perspective, especially because next week's guest is going to be a mom of 2 twins, and we're going to be talking about money in your relationship and how to balance momhood with being a person who's involved in finances in the family, and also balancing momhood with being a working mom or an entrepreneur. So I hope that you guys will stick around to hear that episode next week. Now, I want to remind you, Chelann mentioned in this episode that she is part of the Wealthy Wanderers community. So a lot of the guests on this show are actually a part of the community, but there's also just a bunch of listeners out there who are part of the community. And if you're looking for a community to have these open conversations with about money, about personal development, about other stuff that's going on in your life, then come to the Wealthy Wanderers. You can go to wanderwealthy.com/FB to join. And on top of that, if you want to get all of the links and resources mentioned in this show, then come find the show notes. You can either scroll down into the description box of this episode with whatever podcast player you're in, or you can just type into your URL bar wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 74. And that'll get you everything you're looking for. All right, until I talk to you next time, I hope you wander wealthy.